So being that Canton is so small and has a lot of big city problems, in that small confined area, with these problems, oftentimes it's like a pressure cooker, you know. And I saw that growing up, but in my household, there was racial harmony, My sister, from my mother's previous marriage, she's a redhead, so she doesn't look anything like me, My older sister from my dad's previous marriage, looks like him, So with both of my parents looking different than me, like my dad dark skinned, my mom white, So as a child, that can be confusing. It can be traumatic, because in my household, with people of different races getting along, and then you go outside and you experience the exact opposite. It can be confusing and traumatic because at that young age, you want to have stability on that side so that you can form good opinions about the situation. A lot of times when you hear mixed people or biracial people talk about their racial identity and how they view both sides, a lot of times, a lot of them are looked at, as if they don't have an equal say in it or something. Excuse me. My dad made it clear to me from a very early age that I was black. That the world was going to look at me differently, because of that. I don't think until I actually experienced it that I really understood it, because you have people that are black looking at you and referring to you as if you're not black enough because you're light skinned. Then you have white people that look at you because of your pops and because of your parents' interracial relationship. That of course, you're not considered white either. And for a lot of us as children, that develops a weird kind of outlook on stuff. I feel like we as biracial people have a unique view on it, but once I actually got into the world and stuff, it was obvious to me how the world viewed me. Especially the first time I got locked up, first time I got in trouble. There was no easing your way into it. I remember being young, and my sister was in an interracial relationship. She got pregnant at a young age and had a biracial baby. And I was born in 1979. So at the time when I was born, it wasn't as accepted as it is now. One of my earliest memories of racism was some kids drove by my house and they had spray painted words on the side of their car that said nigger lover, And I think every biracial kid has this moment where they don't understand it. They're wondering, what was that? So going to my parents, crying like, why are they mad at my sister? What do those words mean? What does that word mean? Oftentimes parents will give you the answer they think that they can help you with, but you can't really grasp it until you actually are experiencing it and dealing with it yourself, because they can only help you from their reference point, from their personal experiences. I started to get a little bit of a better understanding of these things once I got into school, But at the same time, when I started studying history, it made me angry, because in my city, where I lived at is predominantly black, you know, and most of the people that are in places that, like Canton, that have high crime rates, you know, stuff happening a lot, you know, people get lumped into categories, you know. People come with all white people are racist. People come with, you know, all black people are into this or into that. And those stereotypical narrow-minded views don't fix the problem. You know, it only exacerbates it. You know, I don't think as a human race that we can fix these problems by being like that. You know, I'm going to school for criminal justice because I want to work with young minorities, brown and black, that are feeding this incarceration cycle. You know, with blacks making up 12% of the U.S. population, but making up 70% of the people that are incarcerated. Those numbers are way out of whack for a reason. I feel that using my education and applying that to the experiences I had as a young man, that I can affect change. You know, I feel like a lot of these young kids that are acting up, you know, and are serious about, you know, the things that they do, you know, whenever they get caught up and people try to pull on their coattails, if it's someone that has actually experienced some of the things that they're going through, that kid is more apt to maybe take a second and think to himself or herself, maybe this person is right. You know, I know a lot of times when I got in trouble when I was young, I was less apt to listen to the person, you know, because most times that person didn't look like me. You know, not as far as my complexion or a race, but as far as a lot of those people were there for a paycheck, you know, and had no frame of reference for what I was going through. You know, I feel like me getting a job, maybe from the social work aspect of working with young kids, whether it's a halfway house or an aftercare thing once young people come out of the juvie system, that I can have an impact on that. You know, when I look back on the times when my life was out of control, the people that were in my immediate circle, they weren't trying to hand me a book or give me knowledge on what the street life was really about. It was glorified, you know, and my parents were straight-laced, so they really were probably confused about what was going on with me. With both my parents working and giving me a good value system and teaching me, you know, the way to be able to be successful in the world, you know, they could only help me to a certain extent. Because at that young age, I was determined to just go out there and do what I wanted to do. About around 17 or 18, you know, a lot of friends started dying, you know, from violent stuff. You know, people getting shot, you know, people going to prison, you know, and I think that was the first time in my life that I realized that these things were real. Because a lot of times when you out there being a knucklehead, when you young, You think you're impervious to the shit. You know, you think that if it's gonna happen to somebody else, it's not gonna happen to me. You know, and I went to this part because it ties in to the racial discussion that's going on. Like when I go on campus and I get into class or whatever, invariably these topics and stuff come up. You know, being in my family and seeing a responsible black male that took care of his children, and then going outside and seeing family members and friends have the opposite, that I saw the effect. You know, so when we're in class talking about these things, I get frustrated because some of the white students, some of the white instructors, they've convinced themselves that these racial issues are a construct of media sensationalization. Excuse me. But I think that's like they're in denial. You know? And it bothers me because some of these people want to go into being police officers. Some people want to go into working with kids in the court system, you know. So some of my classmates are looking to use the criminal justice degree and maybe pair that with a psychology or sociology degree so that they can work at it from that aspect, from a social work aspect. You know, me, myself, personally, I want to be a probation officer because being a juvenile probation officer, you're already getting those kids that have already, committed themselves to being a badass. You know, they're already in trouble, you know. And I feel like that way I can get a hold of them and get in their ear and share my experiences. You know, because, you know, when I was out there messing around, I felt like that was all I had. You know, when you don't have the focus to look beyond the block that you're standing on, you know, it can skew your perspective on the world, or how you look at it. You know, and the overarching subject of race had a lot to do with it too. You know, because there's certain dynamics within both cultures that end up festering in communities. You know, a lot of the white folks feel like, you know, they look at different situations and they apply shit to it that doesn't even come close to solving the problem. You know, when these cases like the girl that got drug around the classroom, you know, I'm seeing comments, and when I have conversations with people, they're like, oh, she shouldn't have smart talked. She should have got off her phone and, you know, complied with the officer. You know, it's called victim blaming. You know, like blaming this person for the cop roughhousing her. You know, and then when you have an environment for a young mind. Let me give you a hypothetical example to try to cast a better light on it. You know, if I'm a black child and I'm born into a family where the father has shirked his responsibilities, you know, the mother's on her own, you know, even if she's a strong black woman, you know, she can't teach that child what it's like to be a man. You know, only a man can do that. You know, so a lot of my friends that I ran around with and ran the streets with, I could see the difference in the way they view stuff. versus how I viewed it because I had a positive example of what a black man should be, and how it affected their psyche, how it affected my psyche, when I see these cases where a young black man is murdered, unarmed, and then you see people saying stuff like, oh, he ran from the police, so he got what he deserved. That's why we have laws, so we don't have people going out here like it's the Wild West, like it's Wyatt Earp, and shooting people down. I think that we always have this view from only our perspective. I think that it lacks compassion for the other people. What I mean is, if I'm white, I'm only having this perspective of looking at it from that perspective. I'm not genuinely trying to put myself in that black person's shoes, and vice versa. It's something that has been ingrained in American culture, and it's a bad thing, because in order for me to truly come anywhere close to figuring out what you got going on and why you have problems, as if I could close my eyes and use my imagination, use compassion with my heart, and think, how would I feel if this happened to me? How people treat each other, because of the color of their skin. That's someone who looks at another person and somehow in their mind they're able to dehumanize that person and then use that to try to justify their behavior. So I'm in class the other day and we're having this discussion because whenever these topics come up, I'm an outspoken person. I'm gonna wait my turn, but I'm not just gonna go for the okie doke in the conversation if I feel that what they're saying is complete bullshit. And I got my instructor talking about as if these problems are all a figment of black folks' imagination. And when these cases occur, they're looking at the situation like, well, what did Walter Scott do wrong before the cop shot him 8, 9, 10 damn times in the back from 20 feet away? I think even that point of it, that where a person just looks at it and instead of stepping into that view where I'm going to be unbiased, it already skews their final decision on how they're going to view the incident. I don't make a lot of YouTube videos, so I don't have cue cards. I'm not, I don't have a bunch of experience in this, so I'm just jumping from topic to topic because it's been weighing on my mind, These things are important to me, I feel like being 36 years old, I have a responsibility to the younger generations, that if I sit around and do nothing about these things or don't even talk about them with other people, then I'm doing them a disservice because they themselves, their children, their children's children are going to grow up and still have to deal with these same issues. We, as the generation before them, should be able to prepare them for these things. Ideally, it would be nice if we could fix these things before they have to go through it. But having racial problems and things that come from that be a problem for like 500 years, it's not going to get fixed overnight. So now let's go back to the classroom where I'm sitting there and You know, I'm listening to people try to justify parts of cases about what happened in the end. You know, so let's take Sandra Bland. You know, this is a young woman who was driving, and a cop got behind her and pulled her over. You know, and she's like, "Why did you pull me over? I tried to get out of your way because you were tailgating me." You know, and then when she pulled over to the side of the road, she didn't use a turn signal, so that supposedly is why he pulled her over. You know, I'm dealing with people in my class, and they're like, why would she be all smart mouthing and being upset with the officer? Probably because we deal with this all the time. You know, when as a non-white person, you get shit like this all the time. You know, some people handle it better than others. You know, but I was telling the class how the cop in the situation could have de-escalated it. You know, he didn't have to antagonize her because the whole stop didn't really go sideways until he started trying to make an issue about her cigarette that she was smoking. You know, the stop was basically already done, and the ticket was written. You know, maybe all she had to do was sign it or something. But then when she refused to put out the cigarette, you could see him get pissed off. You know, and it got to the point where, you know, he's yelling at her, trying to drag her out of the car. You know, and I'm having people use what she would done and try to justify even her arrest. You know, if we looked at each other like human beings and had respect for each other, you know, that never would have happened. Whether she committed suicide or not, I don't think is the bigger issue. Is that a lot of these people that are out there doing this job have these things in their head about other people, and it hurts their chances to do the job effectively. You know, and then you got black folks feeling like they're being targeted. You know, because the same kind of stuff you see in black neighborhoods, you don't see that shit in white neighborhoods. You know, as far as how police treat the citizens. You know, and it's a proven fact in research studies that there's no difference between how much white people use and sell drugs versus how much black people use and sell drugs. The usage rates are neck and neck, but with the incarceration rates being completely different, you know, where it's almost completely one-sided, you know, where Latin or Hispanic young men and African American young men are being incarcerated at crazy numbers, you know, and it's like a modern day version of a plantation system. You know, that's the way I look at it, you know, especially with the privatization of prisons and the moving away from the medical model of incarceration, where in the medical model, you're looking to rehabilitate people. You know, it's more like the juvenile system, because in the juvenile system, when you get locked up, you know, you get in trouble, you go to YA or something, you have more access to guidance counselors and stuff like that that helps the people that get caught up in those situations deal with it a little bit better from a psychological aspect. You know, in the prison industrial complex, people are just warehoused, you know, and these problems don't ever get treated. You know, when a person has spent time in the pen and they black and they come out, you know, and when they can be lucky enough to get a job, it's not enough to change their circumstances, you know, and then you're limited on your upward mobility because of having a felony, you know, and then people don't want to hire you. You know, you've been away from your family, your children have been traumatized from it, so it just exacerbates it. You know, and it's like a revolving door cycle, you know, and us trying to move forward and fix the situation isn't helped by white people pretending that the shit doesn't happen, or saying that this is all a construct of media hype. I agree that it's out there all the time. So people are seeing it more, people are talking about it more. That's why I'm talking about it right now. But when, for instance, after what happened to Mike Brown, the Black Lives Matter movement, instead of the people that they're trying to cry out and have their voice heard and say that this is not media since this is not being sensationalized by the media, that this is the actual experience, instead of coming to the table and trying to fix the problem, it's all lives matter, That's like, okay, we have racial problems, but the way we're going to fix it is looking away from how Black Lives Matter, we're going to say all lives matter. If looking at it and dealing with it that way worked, we wouldn't be having this discussion at work by the water cooler. I think that, I don't know. I get frustrated, because people don't come to the table and genuinely try to fix the situation. People go back to who they consider their sources of information, and then they keep the shit separated.